2019 is over. And for me, mileage-wise, this was my worst year since 2009. So for 2019, I did about 7,300 miles for the year, which isn't that great. And the main reason behind that is that I broke my collarbone in August. So I'll just kind of go back to the beginning of the year and tell you how the year worked out. Started out pretty good in January. I was starting nursing school this year, so that was a new thing. And another goal that I had this year at the beginning of the year was that I wanted to do a marathon by the end of the year. And I was really kind of building up slowly towards that. I was doing like 1 mile runs, trying to do it right to build myself up so I didn't get injured. And then, yeah, when I broke my collarbone, that kind of was it for that plan as well. So a lot of my goals, I didn't really reach any of them. So, it seems pretty weird that one injury can kind of mess up your whole year. But as it worked out, in January, things were going well, like I said, and February was okay. And March was probably the highlight of my year. I did a ride from here to Santa Fe, which was about 215 miles, a point-to-point ride. So that was a pretty fun ride. And then during the summertime, actually, I bought a second house and I was working on that. So I was kind of focused on that during the summer, and I was gonna sort of pick things up later in the year once school started again. But what ended up happening was I had some unexpected roof issues, and I really had to work super hard on that. I was spending all day, trying to get everything done before school started again, basically. So I was working all day. I wasn't writing hardly at all. And I finally got that done before school started. And then I was going to start picking things up. And, one day in August, I just went for a mountain bike ride and had a stupid crash and broke my collarbone. So that was really put a damper on the rest of the year. I didn't start riding outside until I think like mid or late October again. So there wasn't much time to do everything that I wanted to do. I wasn't able to run like I wanted to, so the marathon was out the window. I wasn't, I could have really, maybe not. I could have pushed really hard for 8,000 miles, but that didn't really matter to me. As soon as I realized that I wasn't going to hit 10,000, I kind of took it easy for the rest of the year. And the funny thing is, like, I hate to ride the trainer, but I was riding the trainer when my collarbone was broken, and I kind of got used to it. So after I was able to ride back outside, I was kind of like, well, if the weather is not great, I'm just going to ride inside. And I did that for a few weeks, so that kind of put my mileage down too. And then honestly, the motivation just hasn't been there. I've been more motivated to get back in the gym because when I broke my collarbone, uh, right now I'm weighing 138 pounds, and when I broke my collarbone, I wasn't able to do, anything with my upper body, and I ended up losing. I was in the low 130s, so I've been working really hard to get back to my normal weight, which is right now I'm at 138. That's usually a normal weight for me. It has been for the last 10 years at least, and so I'm pretty happy about that. As far as the collarbone goes, it still hurts at night when I'm trying to sleep, but I think that's kind of normal for me because when I broke my hip in 2014, it was like that for a while. So, but nowadays, my hip really hardly ever bothers me at all unless there's a weather change, and even then it's very slight. So hopefully, 5 years from now, my collarbone really won't be an issue for me. So as far as strength goes, I'm almost back to where I was before I broke my collarbone. The one thing that I'm really lagging in right now is pull-ups. So everything else, like bench press and everything, I'm pretty much back to normal or very, very close. So I've been really kind of focusing on the gym lately, and I'll talk about goals in another video, but that's one of my goals for 2020. So like I said, I kind of lost motivation. I was more focused on gaining use of my arm than I was getting back out on the bike. So I spent most of my time doing that. And then I was like, I'm not going to hit 10,000 miles. Don't really care about everything else as long as I'm riding a little bit, staying healthy overall. I was fine with it. So it was a bit of uh, really a disappointing year, mainly because of an injury. And basically because I was working on the house so much. So I'm hoping that, well, I'm going to get into the goals in another video. I'll talk about that later. But I thought I'd also talk a little bit about the whole decade. So from 2010 to the end of 2019, my mileage for that 10-year period was 115,964 miles. So that's pretty good. I've considered that a really good decade, especially considering that this year was well below my average. So I was over 10,000 miles for every year except for this year. My big mileage year was in 2015, which was when I rode from California to Georgia, and that was 15,439. So that was a pretty big year. Actually, I did 94 centuries that year. That's crazy. So yeah, so for highlights of the decade, the biggest highlight was that ride that I rode from California to Georgia. I did that in 23 days. I think it was just under 130 miles per day. That was inspired by one of my down points of the decade, which was in 2014 when I broke my hip in February of that year. So that was really my first major injury. It was my first broken bone. I didn't really know what to expect. I was scared that I would never be able to ride my bike again. And when I did start riding again, I was scared that I would never get back to where I was before. And, I was able to get back and do some things and motivated in large part by that hip injury. It's like, time is running out on me. I could be done. And I had had this goal for so long to ride across the country, and I just had never actually set forth the plan to do it. So in 2015, I was motivated. I set aside the time to do it, and yeah, finally did it. And it was a really awesome ride. One of the highlights of my life, to be honest. So that was one of the highlights of the decade. Another highlight was in 2017. I actually rode across the country from the southern border to the northern border. So I rode from like El Paso to somewhere in North Dakota, and I did that in it was either 9 or 10 days. It's supposed to be 10, I think, and I actually did it in 9 because that last day I had a really good tailwind, and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna keep going because for a lot of that ride I had a headwind, so I was like, I'm gonna take advantage of this tailwind while I have it, and I actually finished one day earlier than I had planned. So that was a fun ride as well. And actually, at the time, I still lived in Nevada, and I actually rode through Alamogordo, where I live now, not knowing that I would live there one day. So that was pretty interesting. So those are the two main highlights. I did my first Everesting in 2015, and that was also sort of motivated by the hip injury. And I was able to do 5 of those in the decade, which is pretty cool. I think I've failed at least 5 of those as well. So it's it's not all good news. I don't win them all. So I forget when my last one was, but I want to say 2017. I know I didn't do one in 2019 or 2018, and it was one of the things I wanted to do because it's been a while, and I've been watching I've been watching these David Goggins videos, and one of the things he said was like before he was going to do an ultra race, he compared it to like, in the healthcare field, at least if you have your like certifications or whatever, you want to get continuing education, so you're sort of recertifying yourself every year. And his thing was he needed to do an ultra to recertify himself as a badass. And I feel the same way with Everesting. Like I haven't done one for a while, and I really need to do another one. So it's been an interesting decade. I'm looking forward to the next 10 years. I'm going to keep riding, love riding. I may not ride as many miles, but I'm going to have just as much fun. So I hope you guys have had a lot of fun out there, and keep on doing it, man. See you next year.